scripture this morning takes us back into those events following the resurrection, an encounter between Jesus and his disciples, perhaps, and an encounter between Jesus and us. It is recorded in John chapter 20, verses 19 to 23. I'll be reading the words in yellow print, and I'll invite the rest of you to read aloud together those words in white. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you."
After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord.
Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you."
And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit."
If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. The word of the day is delegate. If you see it in print, you might also see delegate, because a delegate is someone who's been delegated. And you put a few delegates together, they become a delegation. People who are sent out with certain tasks, certain roles, and certain authority to fulfill a task. Many of us, I'm sure, have experienced being delegated at school, at work, at home. Someone gets delegated to take out the trash. At work, perhaps you might have been delegated to take on a new, important, exciting, challenging task. Or maybe you got delegated to just do the things your boss doesn't want to do. Some of us are really very good at delegating. We understand the challenges, the opportunities. We have a good grasp of the people around us. We offer just the right amount of training, just the right amount of information, just the right amount of authority, and we send somebody off delegated to do something. Some of us are terrible at delegating, either because we just dump stuff on people who might frankly just be incapable of doing what we want them to do. Or we never delegate anything because we're convinced nobody could ever possibly do it as well as we can anyway. I'm honestly very disturbed by what seems to be the act of Jesus delegating forgiveness to the disciples. If that's what he's doing. Not so much this authority that if you forgive someone, they're forgiven. That's not what bothers me. If this is a delegation, and Jesus is saying, if you don't forgive somebody, they are not forgiven. That's what bothers me. To put something like forgiveness into the hands of people like you and me, what was he thinking? The institutional church over 2,000 years has very often taken this very seriously. We will decide what rightful expectations are. We will decide what is sin and what is not. We will decide who we will forgive and who we will not. We will decide how we will treat those that we will not forgive. A very, sometimes seriously structured plan, I think intended to bring some order into the chaos. But all it does is cause pain. Is this truly what Jesus is doing? If you won't forgive somebody, they're not forgiven. Is it authority? Is it delegation? Or is it perhaps just a reality check? I recently heard on my car radio a song that's, I guess, about 50 years old by a British group with the curious name 10 Years After. You know them, Alvin Lee was the lead guitarist, lead singer, and their classic song had a lyric that focused on this idea. I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. I think there's a hint, if not an outright declaration in the Gospels, as Jesus teaches us, that if you really want to change the world, try forgiving people. Try it for 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 years and see if it makes a difference. Try forgiveness, perhaps one of the most significant life-changing powers present in our lives, or not present. And the reality check that perhaps Jesus is offering in this passage, at least it's what I hear, is to remind us that you and I, and the church, and congregations around the world, and significant public speakers and forces of great prominence can go around talking about how forgiving God is all you want. But if your behavior, if my behavior signifies that there are some people I cannot or will not forgive, then we're wasting our breath. If you do not forgive them, they're not forgiven because they won't believe a God can forgive if you condemn. A reality check of just how powerful you are. And isn't that really what's usually at stake when we won't forgive? We want to feel superior. We want to feel more powerful. We want someone else to feel our wrath or feel our righteousness or feel our authority over them. We want to put them in their place. Isn't that at least what's happening a lot of the times when we just simply won't forgive? We stand up in between the grace of God, ready to forgive and embrace all God's children. We interfere with the hope of the living God and the power that can change the world. We get up and we refuse to cooperate. That's power. To think that somehow we can keep God from achieving God's purposes. Sometimes, good management, when they delegate, they look at someone and assess who they are and what they've accomplished, what their gifts might be, what their strengths might be, and they assign them a task that's just a little bit beyond them. Not something that's impossible for them, not something that's easy and meaningless, but good management, I believe, offers the delegate something that is just beyond reach. Something that will require them to learn and grow. And as they learn and grow, they become more than they were, and everybody wins. I think Jesus is placing within the hands of the disciples, within our hands, perhaps the most powerful force in human relationships, the power of forgiveness, placing it in our hands, knowing it's just beyond our reach, so that we will continue to learn and grow and become the kind of people who can help God successfully spread this grace. So that we will continue to run into the brick walls that we build ourselves as we find someone I can't forgive. I can't forgive. It may be an individual who honestly has hurt us and needs our forgiveness. It may be some people who just don't live according to our standards, and we just assume they need our forgiveness, as if they need our permission to live their lives. But we run into these walls. Boom. Can't forgive them. Boom. Can't forgive them. And we take the gospel seriously, and we remember grace, and we begin to grasp this idea that forgiveness is the power that God has placed in the world to change us all. And if we're loyal, and if we're faithful, and if we'll work hard enough, we finally find a way to say yes to forgiveness. We find a way to swallow our pride, to set aside our ego, to crush our self-righteousness, to process our pain, to accept the fact that, as it turns out, people don't have to live their lives in ways that please us. Whatever it is, we find a way to climb over the rubble and through the obstacles until we can say yes to forgiveness. And we set them free. We set ourselves free. And our spirits soar, and their spirits soar. For a moment, we can all believe that God is a forgiving God, and grace is real, and compassion is true. And then we bump into the next brick wall that we built. Oh, I finally, after 10 years, learned how to say yes to forgiving that person. But these people, bump. And we start again. Loyal to God, trusting in grace, seeking to be faithful, learning how to say yes to forgiveness. To set people free and to change the world. You know, honestly, for many of us, and several times in our lives, the person we have the most difficulty forgiving is ourselves. Maybe because we're surrounded by people who won't forgive us. And the prophecy of Jesus comes alive. I can hardly believe that God forgives me when my family won't. When people who used to call me their friend won't. when society won't, when the church won't. I want to believe I'm forgiven. I want to trust in the grace of God. I want to believe in the power of God's love. But the people around me just, they won't let me. How important is it for someone, for you, for me, to be even able to find ourselves for a few moments in the presence of people who can say yes to forgiveness, who can show not just tolerance but acceptance, who can not just allow us to be ourselves but to rejoice in who we are. Certainly not to say that all of our behavior is appropriate. Certainly not to say that we don't hurt ourselves and other people at times. But to clearly say that we are defined by who we are, not what we've done. And who we are as a child of God. And that's always worthy of celebrating. Maybe all we need, maybe all any of us need, maybe all that anyone ever needs is a handful of people who can embody the grace of God in such a way as to help us believe we're forgiven. And then just watch us fly. Watch us soar in gratitude and joy and the wonder of being loved. I certainly might be wrong, but I really want to see us try. Let us pray. Through forgiveness, O God, you show us that your love knows no limits. That your grace is not just amazing, but infinite. And that we are more important to you than our mistakes and frailties and failures. And we're grateful for the people you've sent into our lives to help us discover and begin to believe that and learn to practice it. Set us free, O God, as you have by your grace. And send us out as Jesus sent his disciples, as we learn how to say yes to forgiveness. In Jesus' name.